Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Tuesday morning to you all. Hope you folks are doing wonderful out there this morning and having a fantastic start to your day and a great week out there so far. Here to bring you the latest on what's going to happen weather-wise for your Tuesday. We'll break it down. Really, the big topic for today's weather is going to be two areas we need to watch out for a risk of severe weather. So we'll break it down, talk about what's driving it, what it's going to look like. I don't think this is going to be a huge deal by any means. Really, as far as the highest threat severe weather area, it's more of a conditional threat. Most people in this threat area probably won't even get a drop of rain, but we will break it down for you folks. We'll talk about the rest of the lower 48 also. And after we get done doing that, we'll jump ahead and we'll get into tomorrow and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, even getting a little bit into early next week. I really do think as we get into Thursday here in a couple days, that's kind of day one of a really active several day stretch of severe weather. So we just need to continue to fine tune these details, get you guys more and more information until we have a really good idea of what's going to happen or what potentially will happen over the end of this week into this weekend, all the way into potentially early next week. So we'll break it all down for you folks. If you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it, and please, if you got any prayer requests, put those in the comments below. It gives me an opportunity to pray over it, and it gives others an opportunity to do so too. I just want to say thank y'all for all the kind words and comments and things like that over the last few days. It definitely it makes me feel great. It makes me smile reading them. I got a whole lot of nice comments with the personal video I did, like I typically do every month, at least once a month. So thank y'all for the encouraging words, the kind words. They mean the world. And it really just kind of puts the fire and just kind of, I don't know, like rejuices me, just fires me up every time I read it. And just really just solidifies the family type atmosphere on this channel. So thank y'all for that. Let's get rocking and rolling. So you might see a little bit something different on the map we're seeing. If you're noticing, we do have fronts on here. So I put this on here for a reason this morning. Might do it a little bit more often. I've had people say, they like when I do this. There's a lot of clutter sometimes on the map, so that's why I don't do it all the time. It becomes a little bit confusing. But I want to show it to you this morning because this is really going to show us what's driving the severe weather threat. So you see this cold front right into here, an L for a low pressure right into here. So this cold front that's moving, across areas of the upper Midwest, this is actually what's going to drive, this is what's driving this unsettled weather right here, because this upper trough's moving in with an associated a cold front that you see right here. Ahead of this cold front, the atmosphere is going to try to destabilize here in like southern sections of Wisconsin, northern Illinois, and especially lower Michigan today. And this is actually going to drive a severe weather threat for these areas. And then down here, we kind of have a sagging boundary, if you will, with energy that's going to ride along this boundary. And this is going to provide just enough lift in the atmosphere here in sections of Texas, maybe even Oklahoma, for the risk of a strong to severe storm or two out here. Definitely going to be energy in the atmosphere, just as anything really fire up. So this is kind of the front that's kind of driving kind of a bimodal setup for severe weather today, just a low-end bimodal setup. So, but as far as what's falling, we got some rain across the Midwest, Mississippi Valley, some rain already falling out there across the Great Lakes region up into Canada. Snow on the northern section of this boundary where it's cold enough, a little bit of moisture across the central Rockies, eastern, southeastern, and southern sections of the U.S. Pretty quiet this morning. Watches, warnings, and advisories, man. There's nothing really going on. There's nothing to really speak on. Some freeze warnings up here. There's some frost. I believe some frost advisories out there too. It doesn't sometimes show up on this map, but I believe those are up also for certain sections. A couple red flag warnings here in southern Colorado. But man, the country is really quiet this morning. It really is. Excessive rainfall outlook pretty much relates to the last map that I just showed you. Below 5%, no real risk of flash flooding today. The Storm Prediction Center outlook, though, it talks about what we just showed you here. Right back to here, and right here. All right, we go back and look at this. Level 1 out of 5 risk of severe weather includes Milwaukee, Chicago, all the way into the heart of lower Michigan. And then you go down here to like northern, northwestern, kind of right where northern Texas meets the panhandle of Texas, right in this region. There's a level 2 out of 5 risk of severe weather. Guys, if you live in this area of Texas, there's a high-end chance you won't get a drop of rain. But there's also a chance you can get a pretty strong thunderstorm. So what is this driven off of? Tornado threat? It's below 2% in both of these areas. I don't think there's enough directional shear in the low levels of the atmosphere for really any tornadoes. The wind flow just doesn't support it today. But winds, 5% chance of damaging winds basically, and then a 15% risk, which means 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour within 25 miles in a given location down here, and then the hail threat. If you do get a thunderstorm in this little area right here in North Texas, kind of between Lubbock, Abilene, and Wichita Falls, it has a chance to produce severe hail, 2 inch in diameter or larger. 15% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. And then you see the entire yellow area has a hatched risk also, which means in the area you see the black dashes going in between, which is the yellow area, you have a 10% risk of hail exceeding 2 inch in diameter or larger. So be aware of that large hail in that area today. I know it's a very small area, but we just got to be aware. And we'll talk more on that here in a second. Southeast, quiet weather today. Everybody's quiet. We get into this afternoon. Beautiful day. A little bit, it's a cold start, especially if you're tucked into the eastern sections of the southeast, where you have that return flow bringing in that cold air. I mean, it's like 40 degrees here in my house, which is pretty darn cold for late April standards here locally here in central South Carolina. But we do got some rain kind of cruising through the Midwest, Ohio Valley, but I don't think that's going to mess with the immediate southeast region. But as we start to get into the overnight hours, some of that rain will make it all the way down to Tennessee, central Arkansas, D.C. area, Delmarva area, and we're waking up tomorrow morning to maybe some showers across the Apps, the Mid-South, Tennessee, and in the Delmarva region. But, all in all, very quiet day across the Southeast. Northeast, quiet start, a nice start. I do want to mention there is a storm system that's going to try to develop. So there's been some chatter about it gaining some maybe subtropical characteristics, but I haven't talked about it much. I actually looked at it a little bit yesterday afternoon for my folks in Atlanta, Canada. I do think it could bring some unsettled weather, but as of now, and I'll re-look over this today, I don't think this is going to bring some monster storm to you guys, some huge coastal storm. But we'll watch it. But you see that energy off the coast. We'll just kind of watch it over the next 24 to 48 hours. But here comes, so we're going to get some thunderstorms in like Ontario today. I mean, look at these storms cruising through southern Ontario. We got some energy out ahead of it just in the form of light rain this evening across Ohio. Some rain entering western PA, western New York State. You see those storms here in lower Michigan that we'll talk more on here in a second when we get to the north central frame. And then we start to get into about midnight tonight. Solid soaking of rain falling in western New York. Getting into the Tuck Hill Plateau. We're getting some rain, Adirondack, some rain in northern Vermont. And then we're getting all the way into Wednesday morning, and we're getting a little bit of rain from maybe Long Island all the way down to the Delmarva region. A little bit of rain in Erie, and it's raining in like Vermont, New Hampshire, just some scattered rains about. And even in this case, we're starting to get the, late April, just a little bit too warm for snow at this point. We're starting to fully leave winter of 2023, 2024 in the Northeast. But you guys always hang on to winter for dear life up here. It's funny, people always say, Mitch, if you lived up here, you would not love the snow as you say you do. I would disagree with you about 95%, but that 5% of me does agree with you that if it gets into like late April and we're still dealing with like 40-degree days, which happens a lot in the Northeast, and, we're just, we're starting to get into May, and it's just very dreary, cloudy, and just damp and cold. I agree. I would want to finally move past it. I think a full-fledged winter, in my opinion, from like November to March, I would be happy with. But once you're starting to get into April, I don't know about all of that, man. But South Central U.S., started off this morning pretty quiet. Will continue to be quiet. A little bit of shower activity in kind of central Missouri that might get kind of rejuiced up later on this afternoon. And then you see these little splotches of downpours and storms kind of in western, west central Texas. And then we could get a more intense storm right in this region, right, where they're showing a slight risk. And we'll zoom into that here in a second. I want you to think that's all I'm going to show you. But then, we get into Wednesday morning. We start to get some moisture building into this region. We'll talk on that, too, here in a second. Some shower activity in Kansas, Oklahoma, maybe down to Arkansas. But, there's also a chance maybe this won't even be actually falling tomorrow morning. Start off around 3 p.m. this afternoon. Not a whole lot going on in the state of Texas. Maybe some downpours popping up, well south of Midland down here. But as we get into this evening, it's around 8 p.m. Here's a big storm or two north of Abilene. Not a highly populated area in this region of Texas. Got some big storms trying to fire up. They kind of pulse up into the late evening hours, and then they just kind of dwindle away. So you look at the NAM, it's a little bit more aggressive with this scenario. Same kind of deal. We'll start off this afternoon, and then there it is. There's some storms firing up right in here. You got to really squint your eyes to look at them, but they're there. See that 1 or 2 storms a little bit displaced, a little bit further north than the latest HRRR model. But these storms could be intense, guys. If you live in this area of Texas, be mindful of this today. Don't let it catch you off guard. These storms can pack a punch if they hit your area. And then they kind of drift to the south, southeast. Not a lot of wind flow out there pushing these one way or the other. So just be mindful of these strong to severe storms in this area. North central U.S. today, we got the snow up in Canada. You see the blue still hanging around. We're still seeing some blue shades. But see this more consolidated area of rain kind of cruising through the Midwest, areas of Illinois, northern Indiana, the southern counties of lower Michigan. Gets a little bit juiced up. We might get some heavy rain with this too if you live in northern Indiana, starting to move. Kind of weakens a little bit as it begins to move into Ohio, but still just a late afternoon into evening, dinner time, kind of wet dampness here in the state of Ohio for sure. And then, of course, I'm not just going to totally forget about you guys with these storms in Wisconsin and the lower Michigan. You guys have a shot to get some storms. Look at these storms that fire this afternoon, drift through Wisconsin. They kind of develop into Michigan. In fact, let's just take a little bit of a closer look at this. Here they come. I mean, we could get some rumbles of thunder as early as this afternoon in like northern Wisconsin. I mean, even some rains kind of switching to snow in Duluth, maybe northeast Minnesota. You guys let me know what you end up seeing. Could get some downpours that might form in the UP, and then might get some snowflakes later on this evening. You might. But check out these storms. These could produce some hail. There's a lot of cold air nearby right on top. So when there's cold air nearby, that means that there's cold air aloft, dry air aloft, which means that the atmosphere could produce hail with some of these storms for sure. And I mean, you look at, lower Michigan, you see these storms kind of just cruising through Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Lansing, Flint. These storms are moving through just around 10, 11 p.m. And they will try to hold together as they kind of get into the Detroit metro area. But definitely if you just live in the entire southern half of lower Michigan, central areas too, you're going to get a threat of some strong to severe storms today. Rain from this more just consolidated area of moisture down here in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, lower Michigan, and even northern Kentucky between now and the next 24 hours. I mean, some areas could pick up over a ½ inch to 3/4 of an inch of rain here. So, good soaking for these areas for sure. Western U.S., man, there ain't a whole lot of anything going on out here. Ridge really dominating the pattern. That'll change over the next couple days. You could get a thunderstorm or two in Northern California. You do have, even into Nevada, you do have that general risk of thunderstorms, so cannot rule that out one bit. A little bit of moisture to kind of get juiced up here along the Rockies, southern Wyoming. Thunderstorm or two, like I said, in Northern California. Very possible, especially in those valley areas. We'll see what happens with those. The HRRR model really likes the idea of those storms. But if you look closely, my friend down here, Ron, in San Diego, you see some moisture beginning to enter the picture. This is our system about to move in. I don't think this system that's going to bring Thursday and Friday, the severe weather risk across the middle of the country is going to do a whole lot for the Southwest, but could bring some unsettled weather. But temperatures today, I was pulling this up. I thought this was pretty cool. Actually a pretty nice day into the Northeast today. You're finally going to get into the 50s and 60s. It's going to gradually warm up for the Northeast. A ridge is going to get anchored over the area, and it's really going to just punch winter right in the face. But, like I said, you can still hang on to winter well into May. But, a nice day in the interior valley regions of New England. I mean, 70s all the way down here into the Southeast. Still got that return flow. So not as warm as you were last week. For sure, more of a spring-like week compared to last week's week in the Southeast. It was more like an early summer-type week. A little bit cooler temperatures in Texas. But look at this stripe of cooler than average. Well, this stripe of cooler air right here. It's weird. It's warmer in Michigan, Wisconsin, northern Illinois than it is in this little area. You're thinking, well, why is there this area, pocket of cooler air? It's because that rain I showed you. Remember, across Illinois, Indiana, there's an area of rain, and it's keeping you guys cooler today. But you move out west, look how warm it's getting across the southern plains, deep into the 90s. A lot of energy in the atmosphere for any storms that can get going. And a very warm day in the Southwest. Not as warm, though, once you get a little bit further north into the valley regions, but still very pleasant day to day for sure. So let's go on and scoot and talk about, well, revise all this information about this, severe storm risk over the next several days. We will start out by showing you Wednesday. There is a threat of severe weather. This is mainly, I would say, driven off some of that leftover boundary that I just showed you at the very beginning of the video. It's going to be draped over this region. So some energy is going to begin to kind of build even more moisture into this area, drape boundary in this area. Anybody south of this boundary, along this boundary, is going to have an opportunity for some severe storms. And this is also kind of the beginning stages of what's going to happen Thursday. You start to get a little bit more of a flow into this region. And just what I'm trying to say is there is a risk of severe storms from Tulsa, Oklahoma City, all the way down to almost Fort Stockton, which I would say Fort Stockton might be on the dry side of the dry line. But we'll see what happens. And right now, just that 5% chance of winds, 5% chance of hail. I don't think Wednesday will be a big deal. Now, it changes as we get into Thursday. And we're going to show you it again. That full-fledged upper low area lower pressure starts moving to the southwest, and this sets up a dry line setup. I think this is very similar to what last Monday's threat, where, any storms that do fire can be quite intense. But remember, last Monday's threat across the plains did not really materialize, thank goodness. The couple days after that did, with the tornadoes in Iowa, tornadoes in Ohio. But with this, we'll see what happens. As of now, level 2 out of 5 risk in the yellow, dark green, level 1 out of 5 risk. Remember, we've been talking about this for a few days now. So what is this driven off? We're not quite sure, but we have a pretty good idea. A very large hail threat will be here, a damaging wind threat, and the risk for some isolated tornadoes. But I don't think tornadoes will be the biggest threat with this. So already a 15% risk of severe weather in the yellow. And then the black outline region, we have a 10% risk at day 3 of significant severe weather. And this will likely be for damaging winds at least. So 10% risk most likely for hail exceeding 2 inch in diameter or larger in this area that extends basically from Kansas through western Oklahoma and splits the panhandle of Texas in half. And it's really for the eastern panhandle of Texas. So we move forward, and for day 4, Friday, this is driven off the same thing. Same system. Much more broad area, larger area, stretching from well north of Des Moines, almost all the way up to the Iowa-Minnesota state line. It includes a section of eastern Nebraska, all of eastern Kansas, large chunk of Missouri. Kansas City is included, Springfield, Missouri, all the way down to central and eastern Oklahoma, western Arkansas, northern, northeastern Texas, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, all included in this. So as we know right now, 15% risk of severe weather within 25 miles in a given location. I'm pretty confident Friday will be a higher end tornado threat. This is almost evolving. It's evolving very similar to, I think it was last Monday into Tuesday. I think very similar, where that Monday tornado threat wasn't as high, even though you did have that 10% risk of a tornado, but for Tuesday it was. Same situation. Thursday, 2 days from now, not as high of a tornado threat. Friday, I think there'll be a higher end tornado risk. And then we start to get into day 5, which is for our Saturday, April the 27th. 15% risk of severe weather once again, kind of in the same similar areas, just shown it a little bit further south. And you're thinking, well, why is there a threat in the same area again? Well, this is driven off a totally different setup. So it's almost like the first system heads on out, right? And then another system trails right behind it. If you've been tuning in with this threat, you already know what I'm talking about. Another area of lower pressure kind of dives back down and then ejects across the plains. This is reamplifying the ingredients for severe weather again. After a very weak cold front might stabilize the atmosphere for a time, I mean, it just gets rejuiced up again in some of these areas, almost all of these areas. So another 15% risk of severe weather in this entire yellow area right here, basically slight risk at day 5. And then the new information we got is for Sunday. Here we go again. The end of the weekend. 15% risk of severe weather, almost all the way up to Milwaukee. Does include Chicago, almost all of Illinois, large chunk of Missouri. Includes big cities like, Chicago, St. Louis, down to Springfield, which I know isn't a big city, but you know what I'm saying. Little Rock, Shreveport, Dallas, and this entire region right here. 15% risk of severe weather. This is driven off the same thing that Saturday is driven off of. Okay, so a lot coming, and we're going to break this down. Not going to spend as detailed on as we did in yesterday morning's video. I say that, and we'll probably spend the same amount of time, but here we go. So if you really want to know what's driving this setup, we're going to try to explain it. So in the warmer colors you see here, like the oranges, almost red colors, that's higher pressure. And the blues you see, that's lower pressure. Flow around both of these features are different, and I mentioned that because there's a reason. I'll show you why here in a second. But this is for Thursday morning, 12Z, Thursday, April 25th. That stands for Thursday morning in Zulu time. Let's just leave it at that. We'll explain Zulu time a little bit more sometime in the future if you're not familiar with it. But this area of lower pressure is dipping down to the southwest, right over Southern Cal, areas of Arizona and areas of Mexico. Okay. This is diving down, and as it does, it's what we call a shortwave trough. We can call it an upper low, upper trough, whatever you want to call it. It's an area of lower pressure. All right, and as it dives down, it immediately takes on a negative tilt. And if you don't know about tilts, I'm just going to draw right here in the middle of your screen. This is a positive tilt. It's tilting that way. All right. This is a neutral tilt, more vertical like this. All right. And then this is a this is a negative tilt. So basically most troughs start off positives and then they tilt like this. Not all of them, but if they can tilt negatively, that means it's a sign of a strengthening storm system. But in this case, it's going to weaken kind of at the same time as strengthening, if that makes any sense. And I'll try to explain it the best way I can. But at the same time, Thursday afternoon, let's go on and take it to Thursday evening. Here it is. This is taking on that negative tilt. And what's going on here is you got a flow going around this like this. Okay. And we'll talk more about this like in hurricane season and stuff like that. So flow going around this area, lower pressure like this. So this is helping to bring what's already a very moist air mass, but it's helping to almost really bring even more moist air into this region. Okay? Kind of just repulling that moist air. Already feeling the effects of the flow around this lower pressure. At the same time, this is bringing its own mid-level jet, its own mid-level flow. Winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere right over this area, which is going to be a very moist air mass into this area, points east. Okay, moist air mass right into here. So you got flow kinematics, you got the higher dew points, your thermodynamics, and they're overlapping one another. Now you're going to have a lot of desert dry air that's kind of getting pushed this way also, but you're going to have a dividing air mass area, which is called the dry line. So that's what's driving it. I hope that makes sense. But you keep getting this area blue that fully kind of amplifies a little bit. Getting to Friday, surface low really gets cranking, really strengthening because of this negative tilt. When we get into Friday, this area of darker blues right here. Now you notice there's another area of darker blue right here. That's what's going to set up Saturday, Sunday, maybe potentially Monday severe weather threat. Let's focus in on Thursday and Fridays. Here it is, area blue, and this is ejecting across the plains. You notice it started right here, and now it's like way over here. So what is it doing? It's doing the same thing. It's bringing that low-level moisture, higher dew points like in the 60s, all the way up into this region. Okay? So very ripe air mass, moist air, humid air building, and at the same time, this is bringing a more even long kind of vertical mid-level wind field into this area too. Your kinematics, remember that the wind flow aloft really puts a oomph in the atmosphere, really a lift in the atmosphere. It's a lifting mechanism for these storms to really get going, and there'll be plenty of that. Plus, all the winds aloft, can increase the tornado threat depending on what it's like in the low levels. It increases the damaging wind threat, and this is going to, create that mid-level wind field that's going to be right across this region because all the flow around this area of low pressure is wrapping like this. So this is yanking up that moist air and that kinematic wind field that's going to support severe weather overlapping over this entire region right into here. And there's probably going to be also, I want to mention, some sort of surface low right in here. Some sort of triple point will be met right into here, where you could have an isolated area in here that has like an increased tornado threat up into Iowa. You got to watch that. You got to watch that scenario. Could be another Iowa big day as far as severe weather. And then you kind of look what happens behind this, and we get into Saturday. There's this other area of blue. This one looks a little bit more potent, but it does the same thing. It dives down, right? Creates a big, I'm not going to keep drawing on this day by day, but it does the same thing, but it's a little bit further south, kind of re-amplifies that low-level moisture into this region, has that wind field associated with this area of lower pressure, and it does the same thing. It just kind of ejects across the middle of the country and brings an opportunity for severe weather for Sunday. Now, for Monday, it looks like this really weakens, and that's why there might not be a big severe weather threat for Monday. But if you're wondering, why isn't this severe weather really coming into the Ohio Valley? I got a lot of viewers in that area in the eastern U.S. I'll explain to you why. You see this area of orange that kind of gets pushed to the east? That's your ridge of high pressure. So we're going to warm up by this weekend for the entire eastern U.S. And as we do, this ridge really amplifies, especially up into Canada. So this actually acts as a forcing mechanism, if you will, to really force this area of lower pressure this way, because the flow around this ridge is kind of going like this. So it really forces this lower pressure to go this way. We talk about this a lot during hurricane season. And, you know, it's not like this ridge really goes anywhere. In fact, it just kind of stays over the same area and really anchors in, just kind of chills out. And then it forces the same thing with this other area of lower pressure behind it, do the same thing. As this ridge is really amped up right over the northeast and eastern Canada, it just really forces this area of lower pressure to keep just kind of moves in, and then it kind of ejects further north rather than east, as you can tell. See what kind of happens with this? All right, there's that blue right there, ejects, and then here comes the next one, ejects. It doesn't allow it to really move into the eastern U.S. So I hope that makes sense. We're going to go over this a little bit faster here. You can see Wednesday, there's already a lot of moisture down here in the south. Okay? All right, come on, work with me. Running out of time. Got to get the girls to school. Wednesday afternoon, all right, we get into Thursday morning. Look at all these dew points like in the 60s, a lot of low-level moisture. And there's that dry line set up right into here, separating like dews in like the teens. The dew points like in the 60s, a lot of low-level moisture. You're that thermodynamic for those ingredients for severe weather. That thermodynamic, which is your dew points, higher in dew points, your surface temperatures, CAPE levels, lapse rates, all those things. Okay, it's there. It's there for Thursday, right? And then this builds even more into Friday. But cold front kind of sweeps in, clears out this air mass temporarily until we get into Saturday and Sunday. And then these dew points really rise in Iowa. How is the thermodynamics going to be? The low-level moisture in Iowa. It looks like it's kind of downtrended on the Euro up here in Iowa. We'll see what happens. And then this potentially could build into your Saturday, where we actually can have a risk of severe weather in the Great Lakes region, still off that first system for Saturday. We'll have to watch, but look how the moisture is getting even deeper down here in the southern tier of the country, 60s. Kind of another almost dry line setup on the Euro, but a little bit further east. But that big upper trough moves in, re-amplifies the atmosphere for Saturday. And look at this area that's going to run the risk of severe weather right in here. The GFS looks a little bit different, but same system is there. And then we get into Sunday. The system kind of weakens, but you still got a lot of deep moisture here in eastern, southeastern Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, into the Midwest. A lot of deep moisture into this area, all the way up into the Great Lakes region. And then we just got to figure out what Sunday's going to do. And in response to all those higher levels of dew points, that surface moisture, of course, we get into Thursday, CAPE levels reaching over 2,000 joules per kilogram, right? We get into Friday, lower CAPE, but higher shear. And I'll show you that here in a second. So just because you see lower amounts up here, that doesn't mean anything. Remember, CAPE levels over 1,000 joules per kilogram in most cases is plenty enough for storm development if you got all the other ingredients working. And then we get into Saturday. See how the atmosphere gets reprimed down here? I mean, even more energy in the atmosphere for Saturday around midday to the afternoon hours. CAPE levels for a huge area, well over 2,000, 2,500 joules per kilogram. And then Sunday, even though you got the 15% risk area, it's a little bit more fuzzy. We just got to figure this one out, but there's pockets of CAPE levels reaching over 1,500, 2,000 joules per kilogram all the way up into Illinois, even some hefty CAPE amounts, storm fuel up here into Wisconsin, a lot of fuel down here. Okay, and the last thing we'll look at, and we'll sign on off, This is that wind flow in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, several thousand feet up in the air. And you can see this being depicted well off the first system that moves in right into here. Here it comes Thursday morning. We call this the exit region of the jet. This is our first system, our first area of lower pressure, the blue you saw on your map, bringing its own wind field in the mid-levels. Here it is, mid-level flow, 40 to as much as 60 knots rides over this area. This rides over a very moist air mass in the southern plains right in here and allows for a really kickstarter of these storms to try to develop. But this really amplifies as you get into Friday. More expansive wind field aloft, and this provides a much larger sector for storms to really get going all the way up to the surface low, all the way down here where there's deeper moisture. You see this here, I mean, mid-level jet over 60 to 70 knots, and then the next system moves in for your Saturday. There it is, even more flow. This could be a more significant deal for Saturday across the southern plains. It's there, plenty of flow aloft, and then we get into Sunday, and pretty large area, but what kind of moisture do you have to work with? All right, I know I kind of speed rushed the end of that video. Had to do it. Got to get the girls to school. God bless all y'all. Have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you again soon.